Morning. This is a video I've been wanting to make for the last few days, but not had chance, not been in the right headspace, but I've come out this morning. It's a lovely morning. That's my view from the lock side this morning, so it's quite, and it was. So the reason I've wanted to make this video is because last Friday was the year anniversary that Jem passed away. So I just kind of wanted to mark that sad anniversary, I suppose, and take a little bit of time to look back on what has been, well, singularly the most horrendous year in my life, but probably the most transformative. We talk about those moments in life. I think this has definitely been one. So yeah, I mean, obviously losing your wife, losing your partner, and I'm strictly talking to those of you who have become, friends, who've become regular viewers of my videos, which there's not many of you, I don't think. But losing your partner, losing your husband, losing your wife, I'm speaking directly to you guys, because you'll understand. Like, it is the singular most horrific thing that somebody can go through. Obviously, and I'm always keen to caveat and say, grief isn't a competition, but I think on this one occasion I will say that losing your partner, it is different. It's absolutely different. So what have I learned? Well, I think the first thing is that children are weirdly more resilient. Everybody said this to me. I don't know where they got this from, because none of them had lost, partners and stuff like that. But everybody, to a fault, said, "Oh, the children are really resilient." And you obviously have that concern straight away that, well, are they resilient or are they masking? And what I've come to the conclusion after a year is that probably a bit of both. But actually, on balance, resilience is thankfully, the more, prominent feature. Kids just are resilient. And I put that down to the fact that I think as adults we do have a propensity to look back on the past and look at what we're losing in the future, and that adds to the weight of what we're feeling, whereas I don't think kids have the same perspective on life. They don't have the same amount of history, and they don't look at the future. They've not gone through the experience that allows them to look at the future through that lens. So I think there's a few things that obviously make kids a bit more resilient. Kids are an interesting one because they're a good tool for everybody else. And what I mean by that is that people come up to you with the best intentions, and they don't really want to ask you how you are, because they know that the answer is a really shit one, and people don't like having that conversation. So they will naturally turn around and say, "Oh, well, how are the kids?" That is the opening line, and it has been the opening line for almost everybody for the last year. How are the kids coping? And I just come out with my standard answer. Kids are resilient. Fine. Because, and I get it, they don't want to ask you because they're scared that you'll give them an honest answer. Which also brings me on to the next point. If anybody can tell me how to successfully answer the question or successfully answer the statement, "Oh, I'm really sorry for your loss," then I'd love to know. I've over the year, I've never really got this right. Sometimes I say thank you, sometimes I say it's alright, sometimes I don't say anything. I don't really know how to answer that one. It's weird, isn't it? But yeah, kids. I mean, a good example was last night. It was Charlotte's. So today is Charlotte's last day at primary school. Another life event that obviously Jenny will miss. But last night was her leaving play. So, obviously I attended with all the other mums and dads. Sat there on my own. And I just looked at Charlotte. I just looked at her, looking back at me, and all I could think was, she should be looking at both her parents now. And I sat there, pretty much like I am now, trying not to look like a blubbering idiot amongst everybody else who was obviously very happy. And I just looked at Charlotte, and she was just happy. She looked at me and smiled. And I was the one who was in a wreck. Yeah. And I just kept thinking that, somewhere in that hall, Jenny would be watching. Yeah. Yeah, it was crap. What else have I learned? Grief affects your health. Absolutely. I think until Jen died, I didn't realise the effect that grief can have on, or your psychological state can have an effect on your health. I thought it was all bumpkin. I thought it was all bullshit. I thought, you hear about it, yeah, your psychological state can affect your health, and I just thought, okay, well, I'll take that on advisement, but it is 100% true. I mean, when Jen died, my health took a huge dip. I was quite worried for quite some time. And I've slowly dragged myself out of that hole, but there's been some long term. My eyesight is fucking gone. In the last year, I've gone from needing reading glasses if I really, really thought about it, putting them on to read a book, but I could probably manage without, to absolutely being dependent on them now. And I wear them most of the day now, to the point where glasses are really pissing me off, and I'm thinking about having lens surgery. So it really does affect your health. I think the other thing I've learned is that people don't understand grief, not the loss of a partner grief. I think people understand grief when it's a singular person who should have died. I think people understand grief in a very limited stuff. In a limited sense, like you lose, and I'm not taking away about anything about losing your parents or a sibling or whatever it is, but it's different, and I've learned that losing your partner, losing your wife, losing your husband is completely transformative, because you don't just grieve a person when you lose your husband or wife or partner, you grieve the identity that you had, because your identity completely changes. I didn't realise this. I thought I was me, and I wasn't me. I was part of a shared identity, which was us. And when Jen died, I lost that identity. And I don't think people understand that. You lose who you are, and that is a horrific thing to lose, because it questions the very foundation of everything that you do. You immediately become lost in a world that you once understood. So you grieve your identity. I think you obviously grieve the person, but you grieve the past you had, that you're now in a position where that past is painful. So you grieve the ability to look back with fondness on some of the things that you do or did. You grieve your future. You grieve the fact that you've lost a future with that person. Not just you, you grieve on behalf of your children. You grieve everything. It's not just... Grief is so deep, because you're battling on every single front whilst trying to wade through this treacle, and not only wade through it, but then you're trying to build a life back on top of it, a life that you don't want, a life that you would give up in a heartbeat for anything. You grieve the ability to communicate. Go away, lazy. You know, you grieve the ability to just turn around and talk to that one person. And I think that's the other thing that I don't think people understand. Everybody has somebody to support them, or most people have somebody to support them. You know, I remember when Jen died, and everybody was obviously very upset. But that night, I felt so hard done by, because, you know, my sister-in-law, who was obviously in absolute pieces because she just lost her sister, went home and she cuddled up to her husband, and he provided her support. Do you know what I mean? My brother-in-law went home, cuddled up to his wife for that support, and I'm sure they sat holding each other and crying all night. I didn't. I went home alone, trying to be strong for the kids, and on the one day that I needed the support that Jenny had always given me, she was the one person who couldn't give it me. And I don't think people understand that, unless you're in my position. You know, you lose your support network, and you lose your support network, that one person who supports you at the time in your life when you need them the very most, and that's so cruel. Nobody can step into those shoes. Not your children, not your family, nobody. Nobody can ever replace that. So you've got to go through the worst thing in the world, and you've got to do it alone. And it's not like you've had any time to prepare for it. Yeah. What else have I learned? Some employers can be utter wankers. You know, when I lost Jenny, I joined numerous support groups because that's what Jenny would have done. I remember thinking that at the time, what would Jenny do? She had a support group for everything. She had a Facebook group for everything, so I joined them all. And one of the things that I found out is that some employees are absolutely fucking awful. You know, there's horror stories where they wouldn't let people have, you know, they allowed them to go to the funeral and that was it. Or they allowed them a week off. You know, I've been so fortunate. You know, it's been a year and I'm only just kind of returning back to work properly. And I feel so sorry for those people who, you know, have awful employees. And I feel sorry for the people who don't have an employer and just have to go through this hardship on their own. You know, you know, for many people, they've lost not just a partner, but also their income, their livelihood. You know, some people don't have life insurance policies, don't work themselves, you know, relied completely on the partner. And, you know, and I massively support the, you know, the widow payment or the widower's payment or whatever it's called, bereavement payment, being extended beyond 18 months and actually being adjusted in line with inflation. Absolutely. You know, it's not enough. It's not enough for those people who have nothing else. You know, 350 quid a month if you've got nothing else. It's you know, as a society we should look after our people better than that. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Well, I've learned quite a bit about myself, I suppose. I always thought I was quite a strong person. Strong-willed, confident. That was my metric of being strong. You know, I was outgoing. You know, my job meant that I could go into a room and take charge of it, and I thought, yeah, I'm a strong person, and I realised, I've learned that that's not a measure of strength. Your strength comes from something much deeper. I wasn't strong. I had a veneer of strength, but my strength came from Jenny. That anchor, that foundation, that gave me strength. Because your strength is only ever tested when shit gets real. And then you realise that the true strength that you have is intertwined with this other person. You know, Jenny gave me my strength. When things got shit, she was the one who walked beside me. And when I lost her, I realised that strength had gone. Maggie, go away. And I had to build it up myself. I had to figure out and build it up myself. And that is an ongoing process, I'll be honest with you. And I'm learning to build that strength. I'm learning to rely on myself. And the other thing I've found is no amount of money, doesn't matter how much you spend to make you feel better, no matter how you engage with other people, how you try to find other people for support, doesn't matter. You have to find it here. I think I've said it before that my happiness was wrapped up in Jenny, and I realised that when she'd gone, that I couldn't be happy because your true happiness is shared with somebody else. And I don't think I'll ever be the same level of happy. I'll do a good impression of it, but you do realise that, you know, he's completely symbiotic with somebody else. Lacey! So that, yeah, I don't think I'll ever be quite the same in that respect. Don't get me wrong, I will be happy, but it's always tinged with, you know, it would be much better if Jenny was here. And I think that's something that I've got to learn over the coming years, is that I have to understand myself, and I have to learn to be happy for myself. And I think the final thing that I've learned about myself is, before Jenny died, I consider myself a very scientific person. I still do. I'm very logic driven. I'm very left brained. But I think it has opened my eyes. Before Jenny died, death didn't really even feature in my consciousness. I didn't consider it. I never even thought about what happens after death to the soul. You know, it just sort of wasn't anything that featured on my radar, because that was firmly in the box of, you know, wacky people who were hippie shit and have their hair in dreadlocks. You know, that, you know, dancing around fucking stones in a field. That firmly sat in that box. But I think I've learned, or my outlook on that has completely changed. I'm much more spiritual now, and I don't mind saying that. I do believe. I have to believe. There's a part of me that has to believe that there is something after death, but I genuinely believe there is. I think when you lose somebody, your initial stages is they're in that place of you have to believe, because the thought of it not being the case is too difficult to deal with. But I think as time goes on, and the raw emotions give way, I think it's like walking through a door, and you know, the logical analytical side of my brain comes back, and now it's not that I have to believe, it's that I choose to believe based on a year of thinking about these things. And I genuinely now know. I was going to say believe, but I think it's more of a knowledge now that there is definitely something after we die. I you know, I genuinely do not believe that Jenny's just gone and I'll never see her again. And I bound that in human terms, you know, I'll see her again. It may not be like that, you know, but I think it's, for me, it's a long hiatus, you know. Well, it might not be, I might get run over by a bus tomorrow, but, you know, for me it could be another, you know, 50, 60 years. I think where Jenny's, it'll be but a blink of an eye and I'll be with her again, and that's good. I wouldn't want her to grieve. Good things that have happened. Well, it's forced me to change. You know, I took a gamble and I moved to Scotland, and I was shit myself about that. I'm glad I've done it now. Genuinely, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. It was the best thing for the kids. I do honestly feel a little bit cut off, but I've got a good group of friends. Maggie, stop it. You know, and I won't always be cut off. What else has been a positive? I've learned not to sweat the small stuff. I used to get pissed off at small things. I used to get wound up, and Jenny would always calm me down. Well, I've not got her to calm me down now, so the answer to that is don't fucking worry about the small stuff. You know, I've kind of turned a little bit into Ricky Gervais. You know, don't call fat ginger kids in a playground local sport. I'm not quite that bad, but I tolerate what I need to tolerate, put it that way, and I don't get wound up about the small things. And you have to. I don't think you've got the energy anymore to tolerate the small things. You know, you've got to choose carefully where you put your energy, because there's not much of it, and I choose to put it into the things that matter, and I don't give a shit about anything else. It doesn't mean I'm a cruel person. It just means that I'm not so wrapped up in what other people think about me anymore. Come here. And I suppose finally, Greece good for losing weight. I think I've lost quite a bit of weight. I'm slowly putting it back on, but I think I lost about 10 kilograms. Yeah. So it's been a year, which seems a long time sometimes, but it's not. I am firmly in the phase of rebuilding, and it will take many years to rebuild. I am at the foothills of the mountain at the moment, but at least I've made that first step. So my job now is to rebuild a life. I miss it so much. I miss her, but I've got to get on. So I think this will be my last video. You know, I talk about how he's changed my life, and I met so many really amazing people. Some of you watch this video, some of you message me from time to time, some of you message me more regularly, and you're all really special to me. But I think I think this will be my last video. So, thank you. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for following me on this journey. A journey that's only just begun, really, but yeah. Nevertheless. And I wish you all the very, very best. And just keep building. Just keep rebuilding. That's all we can do, really, isn't it? Right. See you later. Take care, everyone. Bye.